Hi, my name is Christopher Donald. Welcome to my channel. I'm going to be showing how to finish some pieces that were done using a process called free draping. Free draping is where you use any old container, like a Tupperware container, or a thing that you shape, that you've like a hole you've cut out of something like wood or cardboard, and you use it to shape a form. Now, the downside of this process is that you end up with something which uh, doesn't have a foot, and you can't put the foot on while it's setting. So you have to leave it basically to air dry. You don't have to leave it in its form. Usually I kind of flip them out onto a board, pull the plastic off of it, and then let it air dry. But at this point, now it's stiff enough to support itself, and I can go ahead and put feet on these. And I'm going to show two different types of feet. I'm going to show doing a flat foot on this one, and then on this one we're going to do a raised foot. All right. So first off, now that this is stiffened up, now would be the time to go ahead and clean any of this up if I want to. So I've got some texture left from my canvas on the top here. I might want to clean that up with a Surform. Now is a great time to get rid of any of those marks. If I want just this border between the inside and the outside to be clearer, a Surform is a great tool for doing that. And a Surform is basically just a large rasp used in woodworking and model making to kind of plane down the material in a really nice, even way. It is going to leave marks, so you have to think of this as being like sanding. You know, I'm taking it from being rough and unfinished. I'm adding marks from the Surform, then I'm using another tool to remove those marks, and then I'm using a tool to remove the tool's marks that it left, removing the other marks, and you kind of work your way down. All right, so go ahead and got that all nice and cleaned out. I could use a tool to kind of go around and clean up my little cuts here, since I did those when the clay was very soft. So they have some small burrs, some things I can kind of clean off now. And that doesn't take any time at all now that it's at leather hard. One of the big challenges for my students is generally just trying to slow yourself down and only do things at the point in the process where those actions are best supported. So, which means you don't want to make something hard-edged when the clay is soft. You don't want to try and make something look soft and organic when the clay is leather hard. Right. Okay, now if I've got any small marks on the inside here, I could use my metal rib and kind of shave those off. There we are. I've got a couple little ones here. It's not uncommon for there to be small marks from your fingers pushing or your tools or something, and you want to get rid of those. This is the appropriate time to do that. I'm going to get everything to a specific stage, so everything to the point where I'm just kind of scraping, and then we'll deal with the next level of smoothing after that. All right. On the back side, I've got some similar little blips. I'm going to take those off with the Surform. Quickest tool for the job at this point. Oh, and let me go grab another tool. One sec. All right, we're back. So this one is going to have a flat foot on it. And I've left the clay thick enough so that once this was finished, I would have enough thickness that I can kind of plane or Surform a flat part to it. And the problem with flat feet in a ceramics kiln is that if it starts off perfectly flat, it has a tendency to warp this way. So I'm going to get this so it's sitting the way that I want it to sit. So it sits nice and flat. Get that first. I can just test it out of my surface here. And then once I've got it to a point where it sits where it sits the way that I want it to sit, there we go. Then I'm going to come back, and I'm not going to leave it actually flat. I'm going to take a curved tool, and I'm going to kind of remove a very small divot so that it's concave on the backside. And that should make it so that if it wants to warp a little bit during the firing, it warps flat. If I leave it flat and it warps, it will warp in a way that will make it so that it's kind of tippy. There we go, nice and stable. If I want to, now's the time to kind of clean up the back as well. So I can take either a scraping tool or a rib. It's actually pretty decent shape. Usually the back on these is going to be pretty nice because it's the part that was already compressed before you formed it. Check out the other video. See that? There we go. All right, so nice and finished. As far as cleaning up the jags here, or even cleaning up the top side, my tendency would be to leave the surfform marks and just glaze them away. I can go ahead and scrape them as well, but I would probably not smooth this much more than just removing these marks. There's a bit of diminishing returns when it comes to how smooth your surface is. If you're going to glaze this, it really only needs to be so smooth. Beyond that, it's just getting covered by the glaze. So often students will kind of, they just try and get things so that they're uber perfect, like a mirror finish at this state. I get it's really satisfying. Clay it leather hard, you can kind of get a sheen to it, which you can't get at any other point. And it's really nice, but you don't really have to clean them up quite that much. So to me, this is good to go. I might wet sand or get some more of these little bits out of here when it comes out of the bisque kiln, but I'd actually be more likely to do that than I would be to keep trying to clean it up right now. All right, so he's all done. Now this one, I'm going to do a little bit different. This one, I decided not to use the excess clay here on the rim to make a lip for it. So this can be removed right now. I can take a sharp knife, and in ceramics world, sharp is relative. Sharp is basically thin and it can cut through clay. It does not need to be sharp enough to cut paper. You don't want it that sharp where it'll damage your canvases and the surfaces that you work on. I'm going to get this trimmed down closer to where I want it, but I'm not going to try and get all the way there because it's gotten stiff and it's actually going to be hard for me to have the kind of control I want with my knife. Even this part, I have to break it off. So I would much rather do this with the surfform and just get to a point. This one's a little dull. Let me see. I got a sharper one. There we go. That's better. Over time, these get dull, and you just need to replace the blades. Yeah, that's much better. Okay. This one's a Michael Sherrill one. His takes the same blades as the cheap ones from Lowe's. It's just a really nice short handle. This is a cheaper one that you can get just from like Amazon or Lowe's. All right, now I can get this trimmed down. And I have that original line that was formed when I first draped this. So I know exactly where to trim this to. I'll just trim it right to that line. It goes really quick, and doing it at a stage like this where the clay is stiff means that I actually have more control. If I'm trying to do this and it's too soft, I'm going to be warping the shape of the piece as I'm going. And if I do it now when it's stiffer, the whole thing is just supporting itself really, really well. So I can clean this all up really nice and quick, really consistently. It's the appropriate stage to do this kind of work. All right, there we go. Now I can clean off the top edge. And I would be looking to kind of I wouldn't want a really thin edge here, so I'm going to square it off first and make sure that it's nice and consistent. And then if I want it to feel like it's a thin edge, I'm going to taper it to that point. So I can taper it from the outside, and I can kind of bring it towards being a little bit more of like a thin edge, but in reality it's kind of teardrop shaped in its cross section, which will make it stronger than if I made an actual really paper thin edge. If I want the look of it and I want it to glaze a certain way, that's fine, but I'm going to round it and kind of taper it towards that point. All right, I've done all the work I want with my surfform. Now I can come and clean up the marks from the surfform with my metal rib. So just removing the surfform marks and blending a little bit more into the body. Go. And I'm doing smaller pieces for these demos, basically to not be cruel about it and make you watch a really long thing. And time lapse I find irritating to do. So we're just going to do it in real time here. Here we are. That's all nice and cleaned up. Now I can use a stiff rubber rib and remove the marks from the surfform, from the scraper. So the scraper takes off the marks of the surfform, the rubber rib takes off the marks of the scraper, and gives me a final burnished edge there. I try to not use water if at all possible. I try not to do these things with sponges. It's much better if I can let the clay just finish going through its process of moving from soft to dry without having to keep adding water back in. All right, so now this is done as far as the rim, and now I'm going to put a foot on it. So I'm going to go ahead and let's use a ruler here to kind of give myself a sense of the center of it. There you go. And I want to do one that kind of reflects the rim, so it's going to be kind of like a rounded square. We'll go ahead and start scoring this, adding a little bit of water as we go. And I will very likely need to rescore just before I put the foot on, but I like to kind of get it started, give it a chance to soften up a little bit. I can roll out a coil just on my own. So if I'm rolling a coil, I squeeze the clay to get it started. That kind of compresses the clay. Then I can roll it in the W shape. Then I'm going to flatten it so it's a half round. So I want it to have a half round cross section. And then I can use this and put this on the bottom. This process that I'm about to do is the exact same process that I do at the end of my hump mold draping video. So if you need to see the round version of it, I'd watch just the end of that video. This is going to be the same process, but I'm going to actually kind of square the edges off. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and score this, and this is dried out. So I'm going to score here with a little fresh water. Okay, I'll cut this one to a 45. And go ahead and stick that down. And then I can cut a 45 here. Score this. Score here. Score the end. Make sure that that's nice and wet. Oh, I did the wrong one. Do this one. There you go. Make sure that's nice and wet. Add that. And just work my way around here. Making sure I've got a good connection each time. go. And let's slice through that one. There we go. Make sure they line up. Score my ends. Score my middle. Double check this. Score these ends and add a little bit of water. Nice thing about this scoring tool is that it allows you to do both at the same time. All right, I'm going to make sure that my ends are stuck together. And then I'm going to make sure the whole thing is kind of just stuck down. Nice and flat. There we go. And then I'm going to press this. It started off as a half round, and I want to make it into more of a V shape. So I'm going to compress this clay. This is a nice small foot. It's a real quick one. There we go. And then on these corners here, I actually kind of want to round those off. So I'm going to take off a little of this extra clay. Just going to get in my way. There we go. There we go. Much better. Now I can kind of continue that motion along, compressing the corners and making them more into a V. And this is going to be blended, which is not how I did the other foot in my hump mold video. That one, there was a pattern on the back, but when I put the foot on, it was fairly soft, and I would have disturbed that pattern if I had tried to blend it. With this one, there is a pattern, but this is leather hard, and so I don't have to worry about that. I'm going to score and use water on the parts that I'm going to blend into, because I want that to mix and connect with the clay that I'm blending and not actually end up cracking later. So go ahead and score that. And then I like to take either a wooden tool. Let's see if I got one buried here. Well, it's pretty good. My favorite is actually just using almost like a chopstick. But this will work for the purposes of showing you. And I like to take a wood tool and actually kind of blend from the foot into the body of the pot. You're using a wooden tool because it has some grip to it. I'm not using water on the tool. I just want it to be able to grip that soft clay and blend it and smear it down onto the part that I've already scored. I'm using a tool because it can put more force in a smaller area than I can with my fingertip. I could do the same thing with my finger, but it doesn't quite fit as much as I'd like, and I usually like coming and doing it as the second stage instead of doing it as the first one. Now I'll just take my finger and kind of come in here and get this cleaned up a little bit more, blending it down. I'm doing the foot in stages. The foot will not look perfect when you first do it. You have to see past that and be prepared for it to be a little bit weird while you're making it. The inside here, I can just use my wooden tool and compress that and blend it in. There we go. All right, now that I've gotten all my compression done, now I can take a damp sponge. Make sure you've loaded the sponge up with some scrap material so that you aren't going to wipe the fine material off of your wet clay. And I'm going to clean up the outside. This will also add a little bit of moisture and help these two sections of clay kind of even out. You know, the foot was a lot softer than the pot, and so by kind of introducing a bit of moisture into this area, they should not crack. They should kind of stay in better condition. You can tell how dry that is because it's actually absorbing the water really fast as I'm cleaning this up. All right, then I can go along the top and kind of mostly worrying about those corners and kind of compressing and smoothing, and just work your way around. Give the abrasion of the sponge a chance to act almost like sandpaper and kind of just finish doing all that blending work for you. There we go. Now, you could trim this with a knife to make this flat at this point. I purposely make feet bigger than I need them, and then I can come back and I can always cut them down. It's much harder to add more material, so I would rather make a foot that's a little bit too tall than I need, and then I can flatten it, than to have a foot that's too small. There you go. Couple of ways that you can flatten it. You can use your Surform, like that. I could just put a board on it and just tap it down. And go with the Surform, so it's nice and easy. And then we'll go ahead and just use the sponge. Finish cleaning that off. Like I said, this has a pretty small foot. And clean the inside there. But this is exactly how you do it on something bigger. Just more foot. All right. And it is all done. Nice little foot. There you go. And it'd be ready for me to stamp my name onto it or anything like that. There's a nice little serving dish. So 2 different ways to put feet on. And the third one that I actually have on a separate video is doing a foot on a piece on a hump mold while it's still on the mold. So this is that same coil technique, just done on something while it's sitting on a hump mold. So a hump mold is where you're shaping the clay on the outside, and a free draping mold is one where you're shaping it on the inside. All right, well, thanks for joining me, and hopefully this is helpful. I will definitely have some other videos coming up with different finishing and decorating techniques, but we'll get there, baby steps. So take care. See you soon. Bye.